What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Young Turks. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have so much news to get to today. We're going to give you an update on President Donald Trump's so-called peace board for Gaza, which doesn't include any Palestinians, that's for sure, and tends to include all sorts of individuals that have no interest in peace, including Benjamin Netanyahu himself, who has carried out a genocide in Gaza. But we'll get to all of that in a bit. We'll talk about the World Economic Forum and the unfortunate humiliation the American people have to undergo as a result of our leader and his childish behavior. Can't wait to share the details of that with you. And later on in the show, we'll get into some other topics. But as always, just want to encourage you to like and share the stream. If you're watching us live, it'll help us with the algorithm. It's a free and easy way to help the show and spread our message. So I'd really appreciate it if you do that. And we will be having a members only bonus episode today, right after the main show. Cenk Uygur will be zooming in, and we're going to have some fun, so don't miss that. But I want to get started with the World Economic Forum. So without further ado, let's get into it.
And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States. We're a great power, much greater than people even understand. I think they found that out 2 weeks ago in Venezuela.
Was that a threat? Sounds like Trump bragged about US military might and implied that he's willing to use it during his speech at the World Economic Forum. Is he looking to use the military to obtain Greenland? Let's hear more.
We never asked for anything, and we never got anything. We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that.
Now, whether Trump decides to use military force in order to acquire Greenland is really still up in the air, because we're talking about a man who speaks from both sides of his mouth, and he's been threatening military action or using military force in order to get control of Greenland all week long. That's all he's been talking about. And so I just find it incredibly difficult to trust him on pretty much anything. And this is one of those issues. Now, not only had Trump repeatedly said that military force is on the table in his imperial quest to acquire Greenland, the rest of his speech addressing Greenland seemed like he, is investing more in the military specifically for acquiring other countries or other lands like Greenland, which right now is under the jurisdiction of Denmark, of course. We'll get into that in a little bit, but before we do, here's more from Trump's speech before the World Economic Forum.
All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland, where we already had it as a trustee, but respectfully returned it back to Denmark not long ago after we defeated the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians, and others in World War II. We gave it back to them. We were a powerful force then, but we are a much more powerful force now. After I rebuilt the military in my first term and continue to do so today, we have a budget of $1.5 trillion. We're bringing back battleships. The battleship is 100 times more powerful than the great battleships you saw in World War II, those great, big, gorgeous ships. And all we're asking for is to get Greenland, including right title and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it. You can't defend it on a lease.
I don't think Trump has any interest in defending Greenland. I mean, let's just take a step back here and consider the kinds of conflicts that Greenland is involved in, which is approximately none. The biggest threat to Greenland right now is the United States, and he knows that. Now, the tech bros who funded Donald Trump's campaign are certainly seeking to take advantage of that land. The rare earth minerals that Trump keeps talking about is another motivation. But look, the European countries that have long been our allies are now turning on the United States and threatening to take action. In fact, some of them have already taken action. I'll tell you what I mean in just a minute. But on top of the threats of potential military action in order to acquire Greenland, Trump has also decided to punish the American people through a retaliatory tariffs policy. So after the European countries held a small military exercise in Greenland, Trump announced he would impose new tariffs starting at 10% on February 1st and jumping to 25% on June 1st until Denmark agreed to sell Greenland to the United States. Now, the latest tariffs are going to impact French wine. So he does like these broad, blanket tariffs on countries. And then he does additional tariffs on very specific items or products that get imported to the United States. In the case of France, he's threatening incredibly expensive or costly tariffs on French wine. So who pays for that? Obviously, the Americans who are interested in purchasing French wine are going to pay an increased price. They're going to eat the cost of that tariff. And yeah, France and its winemakers will suffer because if the price is too expensive, less Americans are going to be willing to buy it. So I really struggle to see how anyone wins in this scenario. And purchasing Greenland, let's say it all goes as Trump wants, right? He gets exactly what he wants. He's able to purchase Greenland. Okay. This has nothing to do with actually benefiting the American people at all. This is about, as pretty much every regime change war we've gotten involved in, this is about US-based multinational corporations taking advantage of land that has been stolen by the United States or a country that has been meddled with by the United States. And by the way, I was watching an interview with someone who lives in Greenland, an indigenous individual, and she was responding to Trump offering every person living in Greenland $100,000 in order to be able to control that land. And she was like, we don't want to be part of the United States. We're not really motivated by money. Our culture is a little bit different, but on top of that, we really like our healthcare, and we don't want to be part of this US system. We see what the healthcare is like in the United States. Today, Donald Trump announced that he was canceling those planned tariffs, by the way, after reaching some sort of deal with the Secretary General of NATO. His name is Mark Rutte. So he posted about this on Truth Social. Who knows? This could change any minute. Everything changes at any minute. But for now, this is what we know. Based on a very productive meeting that I have had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. So apparently some sort of deal is made. And he did go on to say that additional talks were being held at and that further information will be available as discussions progress. Okay, and here's what Donald Trump said after, what he said during a meeting, not after, during a meeting with CNBC. Let's take a look at that.
We have a concept of a deal. I think it's going to be a very good deal for the United States, also for them. And we're going to work together on something having to do with the Arctic as a whole, but also Greenland, and it has to do with the security, great security, strong security, and other things.
Tariffs are off. Nothing happens on February 1st.
No, we took that off because it looks like we have pretty much a concept of a deal.
Are mineral rights involved? Is ownership involved? Did the Golden Dome sway people?
I don't want to say yet.
Now, he was asked directly by CNN's Caitlin Collins for more details, and you're going to be shocked to find that he was just as vague.
Does it still include the United States having ownership of Greenland like you've said you wanted?
Yeah. It's a long-term deal, infinite. There is no time limit. It's forever.
Okay, our country is currently falling apart. Okay, we have militarized Gestapo harassing, intimidating, and asking papers from literal American citizens who just tend to, not look lily white. We have a broken healthcare system. We have a housing crisis. We have literally hundreds of thousands of people living on our streets, homeless, hungry, dying. that drug epidemic that Trump is pretending to care about in order to manufacture consent for what he just did in Venezuela. Yeah, he doesn't care about it at all. During the Biden administration, the very last year of his administration, data indicated that drug overdose deaths did dip finally a little bit, but it's still a very big problem in our country. And if you live in a big city, you see it on our streets every single day. I don't care about Greenland. And when I say that, it's not that I don't care about the people of Greenland. I don't care about acquiring Greenland. This is the last thing the president of the United States or our government should be concerned with. And we're wasting time on garbage, not because it benefits ordinary American people, okay? It has nothing to do with that, but because it's gonna benefit business interests who want that land. That's what this is about. That is literally what this is about. He's bragging about spending 1.5 trillion with a T dollars a year on our military when the Pentagon can't pass a single audit. And then you want to talk to me about waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm just tired. I'm tired of the incompetent leadership that we see in this country from one administration to the next. And I get it. Trump he's in a special category of incompetent. Because it's not just the incompetence, it's also the greed, the narcissism, the self-interest, the absolute loathing he feels for the American people, which has just become abundantly clear. Anyway, leading up to today's combative speech from Trump at the World Economic Forum and the announcement of the framework of a deal to acquire Greenland, it looked as though Europe was attempting to fight back. So I just want to kind of give you guys a sense of what type of ammo Europe has if they choose to use it against the US. Because remember, the only thing that's kind of saving us, considering the insane amount of debt our country is drowning in, 40 trillion at this point, is the fact that the US dollar is the reserve currency. We shouldn't pretend like that will always be the case. We shouldn't pretend as though that will always be granted. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, so far, a Danish pension fund called Akademiker Pension, okay, has decided to sell about $100 million in US treasuries. Now, I'm gonna admit $100 million is not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but this has a snowball effect. So the pension fund's investing chief claims that the decision is mostly driven by poor US government finances and our budget shortfall of nearly $2 trillion. So remember, our debt is $40 trillion, right? So the shortfall is the amount of money, like basically the additional debt that we're adding to it because we're spending more than we're bringing in for revenue. But he also made clear that this rift is over, Greenland and the fact that Trump is trying to bully his way into acquiring Greenland. So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just blew it off entirely. Here's how he reacted to that.
Denmark's investment in US Treasury bonds, like Denmark itself, is irrelevant. That it's less than $100 million. They've been selling treasuries for years. I'm not concerned at all.
Nice. Calling Denmark, which has been an ally to the United States, irrelevant is a real good look. Now, he does have a point when it comes to that one pension fund. It's not going to make all the difference, and it's definitely not going to convince the US government to change course. However, there is a catch, and Denmark could actually do a lot more damage if they so choose. So the $100 million makes up a very small portion of the 30.8 trillion with a T US Treasury market, but Denmark itself holds just under $10 billion worth of US bonds. So they could definitely decide to do more damage. On top of that, the European Union, get a load of this, collectively owns 8 trillion with a T of America's treasuries, making it the largest financier of US debt. So if we upset Europe enough, they could really do a number on our bond market, on US treasuries. And some analysts think that this is going to be a massive problem for the United States. I'll give you a specific example. A Deutsche Bank analyst just this week warned that Trump's actions in Greenland risk the EU unloading US debt, a move that could have significant impacts, including raising borrowing costs and exacerbating cost of living problems, which, as we all know, have not been alleviated under the Trump administration. Now, Bessent also criticized that analysis from the Deutsche Bank analyst, and he basically said it's not that big of a deal, it's just one analyst. But there have been other analysts who have said similar things, and they've been raising red flags. Now, America's largest debt holders include Japan, who, Japan has $1.2 trillion in US treasuries. China has $682 billion in US treasuries, and Canada has $472 billion in US treasuries. We've been making threats against Canada. If Canada chooses, they could do some real damage to the US economy. Obviously, same with China. I think we're on good terms with Japan at the moment, but with Trump, you never know. Now, there are other ways Europe can and has retaliated. So European leaders have decided maybe they're going to consider some retaliatory tariffs. Now that there's some sort of framework of a deal, I'm sure they've dropped that, but that is a possibility. And then on top of that, there's this issue, and it's known as the trade bazooka. European Parliament member Bernd Lang said the Committee on International Trade would on Monday discuss the use of the EU's anti-coercion instrument, a far-reaching measure described as a trade bazooka. It would allow the EU to substantially restrict US companies' access to its single market, block them from tenders, reduce the flow of goods and capital, and curb foreign direct investment in the bloc. And while Europeans certainly have been worried that Trump's actions in regard to Greenland could essentially dismantle NATO altogether, the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, not so worried at all. In fact, he says the European leaders will come around, and when they understand that, they need to be under the US security umbrella, essentially saying, look, Europe's always going to play ball with us because they need our military. They need us to defend them. And look, that could be true to some extent. But we certainly need investment from the EU in order to stay afloat economically. And acting as the bully on the international stage won't win the Trump administration any friends, that's for sure. It won't win the American people any friends. But Trump seems to have a hard time accepting that.
Well, the last few days when I told them about Iceland, they loved me. They called me daddy, right? Last time. A very smart man said, he's our daddy. He's running it. I was like running it. I went from running it to being a terrible human being.
Okay, he misspoke there, and people are making fun of him because he said Iceland instead of Greenland. When you're speaking off the cuff, sometimes you misspeak. I do it all the time, and it's a mistake. So I'm not going to ding him for that. However, did the NATO Secretary General call him daddy? And honestly, I did kind of remember someone calling him daddy. I couldn't remember if it was like a US-based right winger. I know a lot of them actually do treat him like daddy, but we looked into this and here's what we found. So this has to do with last summer. This is after Trump had made a statement in regard to Israel's conflict with Iran. If you can remember, he used an expletive. This is what I'm talking about. We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the F they're doing. And of course, he actually used the expletive. And in response to that, the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, said, sometimes daddy needs to use strong language. Don't do that. Just don't do that. You're a grown man. Don't refer to another grown man as daddy. It's not good. Now, he probably regretted it immediately afterwards because he tried to clarify his statement. So Rutte later said, the daddy thing, I didn't call him daddy. But you did, okay? What I said is that sometimes in Europe, I hear sometimes countries saying, hey, Mark, will the US stay with us? And I said, that sounds a little bit like a small child asking his daddy, hey, are you still staying with the family? So in that sense, I use dad. No, okay, like no one's buying this. You called him daddy. Don't do it. Trump will remember it. There's one thing that Trump remembers, and he keeps it in his back pocket. Whenever someone says something complimentary toward him, he will remember it and he will bring it back up. And when you call him daddy, he's going to remember. And he brought it up. And his whole point is, look, they went from calling me daddy to now, wanting to retaliate because I want to take Greenland. Okay. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. They're going to be upset about that. And perhaps Trump should be more concerned with how the American people feel about his weird obsession with taking Greenland. Now, let me be clear. If you conduct the same polling and you ask Americans, would you be supportive of Trump engaging in a mutual agreement, a mutual transaction in which both parties are totally okay with the sale of Greenland so the US can acquire it? I'm sure they will have a different response. But everything we've seen in the news, everything we've heard from Trump is all about either using military might or engaging in ridiculous tariffs in order to take Greenland by force. So keep that context in mind and take a look at how Americans feel about what's been going on.
Trump's net approval rating on the Epstein files, look at that, just absolutely awful. 38 points below water. But any try to buy Greenland is somehow even more unpopular. Look at this. It's 40 points below water. There is barely an issue out there that's worse for Donald Trump than the Epstein files. But any attempts to buy Greenland or use military force on Greenland, which even polls worse than this, is one of them. It is arguably the most unpopular thing that Donald Trump can try to do is mess with Greenland.
So Greenland is polling worse than the Epstein files.
You got it.
And look, not only do I think the polling is reflective of America's distaste for the way Trump is going about this, but I also think it has a lot to do with the fact that Americans are suffering here in America. And much of the news that Trump makes has to do with foreign policy. It doesn't really seem like he is focused on what's happening in this country. And then on top of that, whenever you think of his domestic policy, you think about chaos. You think about what we're seeing on our streets right now. You think about actual local police chiefs and deputies complaining about how they're being racially profiled by ICE. So it's negative domestic policy. So I don't know why Trump is going in all of these disastrous directions and just kind of ignoring the way the American people feel about it. But it's not just that people have bad feelings toward Trump here at home. It's international. And I think the way he's been received at the World Economic Forum and the rhetoric he's been using toward our longstanding allies isn't making the situation any better. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears a little bit. Not really, though. We're going to talk about more foreign policy, specifically Trump's so-called peace plan for Gaza.
They called me daddy.
I like tacos.
They called me daddy.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to our first social break. Don Data Dragon in our members section says, I think BRICS won. They played Trump perfectly. You got to give me a little more than that because I disagree, but you might know something that I don't know. So please write in again. Look, I do think that the BRICS alliance is certainly threatening to the United States and the dominance of the US dollar. There's no question about that. And I do worry about that. But if there are any additional developments you want to share with me, please let me know. Nerd Ferguson writes in and says, our country deep in debt and unable to fund anything, but still buying a whole other country is kind of like someone who's in debt, homeless and unemployed saying, I think I'm going to buy a yacht. Yeah, I mean, you make a good point there. The One True Coffee Dragon says, a concept of a deal that will last forever. That's just Tuesday in America. All right, thank you to our Twitch members, especially those who have subscribed through Prime. If you're interested in that, you can go to tyt.com/prime to get a free subscription to our Twitch channel. Green New Dealer Dragon says, bankruptcy will stop us at some point. I don't want, why? What? But like, ordinary people are going to suffer from that. Like, that's the devastating part of all of this. Ordinary Americans are going to suffer from that, and they don't deserve it. Bankruptcy will stop us at some point, $40 trillion in debt, but no matter, but on the never-ending wars. Oh, bring on the never-ending wars. Yeah, I mean, Whether you say that or not, they're coming. They've been coming and they haven't stopped. Let's go to Suave, who says, the only thing Trump has successfully accomplished was ruining any chance of JD Vance ever being president. I would have said the only thing Trump accomplished on January 6th, 2021 was destroying his chance of ever becoming president again. And here we are. So never say never, and don't put your, don't put your guard down. All right, let's go to more of our members. Thank you to our new members. We've got, this is the handle. I'm just going to read the handle, and it's a member, so I respect it. Flaming TARDIS, welcome to TYT Premium. We also have Danielle Ellis. Thank you for being a new TYT member. Thank you to CDN Norse Dog Dad, who gifted 1 TYT membership. And in our super chats, oh gosh, you guys are writing lots of super chats today. We've got Jonah Morton, who says, I remember 10 years ago, we disagreed as to how to deal with the Trump insanity. Now here we are a decade later, Anna and we are almost in agreement. Yeah. He's definitely worse in his second term than he was in his first. There's no question about that. He's totally unhinged, totally uncontrolled, and Congress has basically just completely given up, ceded complete power to the executive branch, and it's just devastating. Anyway, we've got a lot more to get to, so let's get to it.
They called me daddy.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. And you know what? I want to help you save some money. You might be overpaying for your phone bill. In fact, I know you are. Because if you're not using Noble Mobile, you're just spending too much on your cell service. So if you're tired of the doom scroll, you're not alone. The entire system is designed to keep you glued to your screen, while the billionaire owners of big wireless profit from every minute that you're on it. But that's not the case with Noble Mobile. They have a revolutionary idea. They pay you to use your phone less. So on their no bull plan, you actually get unlimited data for just $50 a month, which is like, come on, that's a steal. And starting today, you can get $40 off your first month, which means you're only gonna pay $10 for your first month. That's crazy. No one does that except for Noble Mobile. So if you wanna learn more, just go to tyt.com/switch. That's tyt.com/switch. All right, now that that's out of the way, why don't we get to this?
I think there will be a signing tomorrow. Of course, there are different views on this, but how important do you think this signing is on the board of peace? And do you think this is going to sustain? Do you think we now will see Gaza reconstructed and billions of US dollars invested?
I do. I mean, I think we have peace in the Middle East.
We do not, in fact, have peace in the Middle East. I think that much is pretty clear. I mean, just last week, there was news that we were going to attack Iran imminently. Luckily, that didn't happen because Netanyahu realized, oh, wait, we're not ready to withstand a counterattack from Iran. So there's that. And then there's the whole, ongoing genocide thing in Gaza that the Trump administration wants to pretend isn't still happening, but it is. And if you want to just get a little update on his board of peace, which is part of his so-called peace plan, well, we've got that update for you. So the charter for Trump's board of peace is expected to be signed by some world leaders this week, but dozens of countries seem to be bucking Trump by resisting invitations to join. And I think they're the smart ones, to be honest with you. You'll understand why as I give you the details. So one person who has accepted the invite is super peaceful guy, everything he does is above board, no issues at all. His name is Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, the guy who carried out and oversaw the ongoing genocide in Gaza. So yeah, that guy is going to be part of a board of peace. And the Board of Peace was originally billed as a committee to specifically oversee the reconstruction, the building of Gaza for about 2 years, as laid out in this 20-point peace plan that was accepted by the UN Security Council. Because, in some cases, the UN tends to be a joke, and this is one example of that. But now its scope has been significantly expanded to other conflicts worldwide, if you can believe it. Its charter makes no mention of Gaza and appears to take a swipe at the UN, saying that the new board should have the courage to depart from approaches and institutions that have too often failed. So for the UN member states that play along with Trump, congratulations. This is what you get. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. The proposed charter said the Board of Peace would secure enduring peace in areas affected or threatened by conflict, not just Gaza. And look, whether you wanted it or not, the US is going to meddle in the Middle East as long as we're allies with Israel. So that was to be expected. Now, what other countries and what other regions might be impacted by this, we're just going to have to wait and see. But to say that this is a peace deal or part of a peace deal, I think is a joke. It also names Donald Trump, the chairman of the board, and now a US official is suggesting that he could remain in that role for life, which, hopefully won't be too long. But the chairmanship could be held by President Trump until he resigns from it. So as for the rest of the board, you're gonna love this. The charter says that invited member states would be limited, okay? They're not gonna be, members of this board forever. They're gonna be limited to 3-year terms unless they pay about $1 billion each, in which case they can gain permanent membership. So great, let's use the aftermath of a genocide in order to, I guess, make money by shaking down other countries for $1 billion. Okay. Out of about 60 who have received said invitations, only about 25 countries have agreed to join the board so far. And that's according to Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. This list that I'm about to read to you is incredibly painful for me, but I got to do my job. So here we go. Among those who accepted are the UAE, which is Israel's bitch. I'm not surprised by that at all. Bahrain, Egypt, Turkey, Hungary, Armenia. Now look, Armenia has backed the Palestinians. There's no question about that. That's why I don't want Armenia to be part of this faux peace board. It's not a good look. This is not really about peace. This is not really about rebuilding Gaza. I have issues with the Prime Minister of Armenia, to be honest with you. He doesn't seem to have great political instincts, but the rest of that list includes Armenia's foe, by the way. In addition to Turkey, you have Azerbaijan, Belarus, and Israel, the country that caused all the death and destruction in Gaza. Okay. Now, Netanyahu had originally refused the involvement of Turkey in this peace board. So he has apparently changed his mind, though. So initially, Israel said that committee was not coordinated with the Israeli government and ran contrary to its policies. They really don't like Turkey. But Netanyahu has changed his mind and now has accepted the invitation to not only be part of the board, but it seems like he's kind of giving the involvement of Turkey a pass, at least for now. And that is despite objections from some of the far-right ministers who want Israel to take unilateral control of Gaza, which they're gonna do anyway. Like they're gonna do that anyway. Don't worry, you genocidal freak. So according to Israeli media, National Security Minister and terrorist Itamar Ben-Gvir called for a return to full war and voluntary migration rather than handing Gaza to a board involving Turkey. Now, Netanyahu's fellow war criminal Vladimir Putin was also invited to join the board, but hasn't yet said whether he would accept. And neither have many other European and Asian nations, including the UK, Canada, India, China, Germany, and Ukraine. Now, other countries, meanwhile, have indicated that they absolutely will not join the board, including Sweden, France, and Norway, which I think is a smart decision. Opposition coming from many world leaders is rooted in concerns that this new Board of Peace could undermine the work of the United Nations, which, I think there could be some truth to that. One diplomat said of the board, it's a Trump United Nations that ignores the fundamentals of the UN Charter. But I would say the UN kind of ignores the fundamentals of the UN Charter. I mean, we've had war crime after war crime after war crime committed by a UN member state, Israel. And the way that the UN Security Council is structured allows for the United States to just willy-nilly veto anything, even if every other Security Council member state votes in favor of said resolution. So what the hell is the point? What is the point? There's no point. If one member nation has the ability to just veto something, then, I mean, you guys have already been, the UN has already been castrated. And it's been castrated for a long time. So if you're worried about maintaining NATO, maybe have a conversation about what needs to be done to bolster the effectiveness of NATO in enforcing international laws to prevent war crimes from happening. But they're unable to do that. And by the way, Trump's Board of Peace has nothing to do with peace. This is business exploration, okay? That's what this is gonna be. And it honestly disgusts me. Their concerns, by the way, were bolstered by Trump himself, and I'm talking about the UN's concerns. When asked by a reporter on Tuesday if the board should replace the United Nations, Trump said it might. Of course he did, but he also said, quote, I believe you got to let the UN continue because the potential is so great. Okay, so again, this is classic Trump. He speaks from both sides of his mouth. So no one can call him a liar, right? He said both things. So he could just cite one of the things he said, even though he did both the pro and anti in every scenario imaginable. All right, so let me reset for this next part because I want to talk a little bit about the ceasefire deal and what this means for Gaza. So under Trump's alleged ceasefire deal in Gaza, well, the so-called peace board that would be part of maintaining peace and rebuilding Gaza, its executive committee is supposed to be in charge of implementing the second phase of this 20-point agreement, right? The so-called peace plan. And that includes deploying an international security force, disarming the Palestinian militant Hamas group, and rebuilding the war-devastated territory. It will also supervise a newly appointed committee of Palestinian technocrats who will be running Gaza's day-to-day affairs. Okay, additionally, it will be tasked with overseeing the next phase of the Gaza peace plan. And I just want to remind you all of who's involved, which countries have agreed to be part of this so-called peace plan, right? Because it includes Israel, it includes, other countries. I mean, there was an invite for Vladimir Putin to be involved, and we haven't heard an answer yet. But the fact that you have Benjamin Netanyahu part of this peace board, you have Israel part of this board, to me signals that this isn't really a serious effort in rebuilding Gaza and maintaining peace on behalf of the Palestinian people. They're pretty much an afterthought. In fact, no one who identifies as Palestinian has been invited to be part of this peace board, period. So additionally, it'll be tasked with overseeing the next phase of this Gaza peace plan, right? So the White House says the committee's members include Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, who, if you can remember, salivated over the thought of doing property developments, resort developments in Gaza. It's prime real estate, Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who is a neocon. There's no question about it. Fully on board for the war in Iraq in 2003. Total disaster of a person, especially when it comes to issues of foreign policy. The Turkish foreign minister, a Qatari diplomat. Surprised that Qatari was included, especially since we are controlled by Israel and Israel wouldn't allow something like that to happen. But for now, Qatar is involved. The CEO of Apollo Global Management. The CEO of Apollo Global Management and an Israeli businessman. Do I really need to keep going? Do I even need to keep going? No Palestinians are on the board, and the scope of the committee's legal authority and enforcement tools is still unclear, totally unclear. we don't know exactly how this is going to function in practice because it doesn't even really matter. This isn't about rebuilding Gaza. You have an Israeli businessman and the CEO of Apollo Global Management involved in this. Plus, the board's charter says its chairman, Trump, will have extensive executive power, including the ability to veto decisions and remove members, subject to some constraints. So even though some nations, some countries like Qatar and Turkey are included in this committee, much to the chagrin of Israel, of course, Trump can pretty easily disregard their input on what should happen in Gaza, much like he disregards the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. And here's another major issue. According to Haaretz, Israel is currently refusing to allow Palestinian technocrats who are, supposed to govern Gaza from even being able to enter the strip in the first place. So the committee was set to enter Gaza through the Rafah border crossing this week and basically take over civilian administration. But Israel decided to block them, and now committee members are in Egypt working with the US to approve their entry to Gaza by the end of the month. Is anyone really under any impression that there's peace in the Middle East, that Trump has solved it, or that his efforts here are really about rebuilding Gaza, pushing for, self-determination for the Palestinian people? It's none of that stuff is involved in this. It's so obvious. So, given Israel's refusal to admit them into Gaza, and that's the Palestinian technocrats that are supposed to essentially take part in the governing, sources involved in committee discussions in Cairo said they do not know when and how they will begin work on the ground. Now, a Palestinian source also told Haaretz, an Israeli paper, that Israel's behavior reinforces fears that Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, intends to undermine the committee, because of course he does. According to the source, direct intervention by Trump and international mediators is required to compel Israel to approve their entry. If there is no intervention and permission to enter, then all the talk about implementing phase 2 of the ceasefire will be in vain, he said. Meanwhile, the actual people of Gaza continue to suffer, and that's a real issue. So here's UNICEF spokesperson Tess Ingram.
Continuing right up until today, it's wet, it's cold, and I was talking to colleagues this morning who tell me that the wind is still ferocious. And we're now 3 months into a so-called ceasefire. And what does a day look like, Stephanie, in the life of a child in a ceasefire? Well, everyone, I think, would agree that they should be able to sleep safely, wake up, get a warm drink and something to eat, have a shower, and then go to school. But at the moment in Gaza, children are really only getting 2 at the most of those 5 things. And the suffering really does continue. Even though the world is looking away, we are still seeing, of course, violations of this ceasefire, with more than 100 children killed since the ceasefire began, but also children dying from preventable causes like hypothermia, with 7 children dying already this winter from the cold.
I don't think that most people even need to do this to understand the severity of what these kids are going through. But if you find yourself having a hard time understanding why people like me are so angry about the situation in the Middle East and what's been happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, if you have any kids in your family, maybe take a little bit of time and spend a day with them. Take them to the movies and just understand how defenseless, innocent, precious they are, and how deserving they are of adults who want to protect them, But the slaughter continues. Israeli forces killed at least 11 Palestinians in Gaza on Wednesday, in one day, including 3 journalists, which is not shocking, and 2 boys who were collecting firewood, hospitals said. One of the 13-year-old boy's mothers told the Associated Press that he was hungry and went out to gather firewood so she could cook. He told me he'd go quickly and come back. So since the so-called ceasefire was implemented, more than 460 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli fire, and that's according to the Strip's health ministry. So that's your update. There is no peace in the Middle East. And as long as we continue enabling any country, okay, I know I make it about Israel because Israel is the country we're enabling in the Middle East. But as long as we continue to enable any country to continue committing atrocities, they will continue committing atrocities and there won't be peace. Trump knows that. I mean, he can be a total buffoon, but I think he understands that. But the reality is there's really no daylight between him and Netanyahu. So as much as Barak Ravid from Axios would like us to believe so, that's an op. It's just not true. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back.
I have concepts of a plan.
Wong Jun writes in and says, just change the name of Greenland to Epstein Island. That'll get Trump to shut up about it. That's actually kind of brilliant. That is amazing. Kelly Kay writes in regarding Canadian sentiment. Yeah, Canadians are completely fed up with Trump's blustering and bloviating, great word. However, since day one, we have taken his nonsensical BS as real threats because you could never trust the ramblings of a madman. At the beginning of his presidency, Prime Minister Mark Carney, who, by the way, gave a banger of a speech at the World Economic Forum. Please check it out. We just didn't have enough time to cover it today. But anyway, so the Canadian Prime Minister, at the beginning of his presidency, reportedly threatened Trump with dumping bonds, and that shut him up for a while. However, we have now reached level 2 of his fascist ladder, where he is now kidnapping foreign leaders of sovereign nations, attempting to annex Venezuela and Greenland, threatening Canada again with annexation, saying that Canada would be the 51st state, BS, has united Europe against the US. Oh God, you're starting to give me like tremendous anxiety. It's not ordinary Americans' faults, okay? We don't matter at all to our government. Our thoughts, our feelings, our concerns in this so-called democracy don't matter at all. Please don't take it out on us, or at least forgive us, okay? Because I hate what's going on. It's absolutely terrible. Remind me again how any of this is supposed to make America great again. It's not, and it hasn't been, so I agree with you. And thank you to, I hope I don't mispronounce your name, Sawyeram, who sent me a beautiful photo of her cat. Thank you so much for sending that to me. Let's go to David W. Ryan, who says, we can't afford national health care, but we can buy Greenland. Yeah, of course. Let's go to Dav Mill, who says the US is $34 trillion in debt and growing. All other countries have to do is switch to another reserve currency and hyperinflation would hit the US. Yeah, I'm worried about that. I wish I got some indication from our federal government that they're worried about it, but they keep brushing that off like it's no big deal. Stinky Feet says this Greenland mess is yet another distraction from Epstein. They are just throwing anything at the wall and hoping it is stickier than inflation. Maybe. I really think Trump wants Greenland. I don't think it's because of national security. I really do think he sees this as an opportunity to make more money. And in his second term alone, he's made close to $1.5 billion in personal wealth. We're going to get to that story later in the show. All right. Zeldrian says, can't we just invoke Article? Zeldrian, no, we can't. Congress is useless. You can't invoke Jack if you have half of Congress enabling anything and everything Trump wants to do. They don't see Congress as a part of this system of checks and balances. And in the end, we suffer as a result of that. They have ceded power. up, everyone? Just want to remind you one more time today about our sponsor, who we love because of the fact that they're saving our viewers some money, and that's Mobile Noble, the only phone plan that pays you to use your phone less. Get unlimited data for just $10 a month. $10 for your first month, powered by the T-Mobile network. Plus, you get cash back for any of your unused data. To learn more, go to tyt.com/switch. All right. I usually don't care about people making ridiculous bad faith attacks against me. It is what it is. I'm busy. I don't want to spend much time defending myself on my own show when I could be sharing the news with you guys. But I really couldn't resist this one.
I had this debate with Ana Kasparian. Obviously, when the 12-day war was going on, I'd said, I'm like, I think you got to give him a chance. I don't think this becomes a forever war. And she adamantly was like, yes, it does. And you're wrong. And I was like, all right, if it turns out not to be, will you eat your words? Yes. Do you think that day has come?
Bitch, are you high? Are you high? Like, where have you been over the last few weeks? A US strike on Iran was imminent last week. Luckily, it didn't happen, and I'll get to why in just a moment. But to argue that this potential regime change war with Iran is over, it really sounds like something an oblivious fitness guru would say, while talking to Dave Rubin, of all people, of course. So you want to play? Let's play. Let's play. Because we could have had this debate, on the show we used to host together, the one that you ran away from live on air because you couldn't, debate me and decided to run away instead. But nonetheless, we live in hell. So again, like, how do you not know what's been going on over the last few weeks? So I'm going to respond to a video that was put out by the channel Actual Friends. And in this video, you have Dave Rubin, Jillian Michaels, and I think Drew Pinsky was also part of it, although he didn't annoy me nearly as much as Jillian's clueless commentary did. And I mean, look, I think making fun of Dave Rubin and how brain dead he is just, it's useless. Everyone knows it. There's really no point. But when it comes to Jillian, again, if you wanted to debate me on these issues, you had an opportunity and you ran away from it. So I'll just respond to your video here. So in it, she brings up a clip from the debate we had last summer, right before Trump decided to strike Iran's nuclear facilities. And I kept saying in that debate over and over again, this isn't just about Iran's military capabilities. This isn't just about Iran obtaining nuclear weapons. In fact, we had a nuclear deal with Iran, which prevented Iran from building nuclear weapons. It allowed members of the international community to check and make sure that they're not building nuclear weapons. But Trump ripped it up because it's not about preventing the nuclear weapons from being obtained. It's about regime change. The nuclear weapons, much like the war in Iraq and the weapons of mass destruction that we didn't find in Iraq, it's the excuse to go to war to spur regime change. But I get it. This has been my interest for decades, for literally decades. I went to school for this. I'm not trying to brag about credentials. I don't think they matter at all. But to go to school for it, it means that I've been passionate about this for literally decades. And the thing about political commentary or analysis is that you're very shaky at first because you don't have much to recall. You get what I'm saying? But when you've been doing it for many, many years, when you've been doing it for now 2 decades, you build this library of knowledge about a particular issue. In this case, I know a lot about our conflict with Iran and what's motivating our conflict with Iran. I was reading about this kind of stuff when Jillian Michaels was on The Biggest Loser. Was she reading about what's going on in Iran? I doubt it. Okay. So anyway, she brings up a clip from the debate that we had last summer, and let's take a look at that. When we inevitably get dragged into this war, when we inevitably end up spending tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion, depending on how long that war with Iran lasts, will you guys come back on this show and at least admit I was right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Conversely, though,
what's the question? Say it again.
Within 6 months, and Iran is defanged in the Abraham Accord. This is a pipe dream. I get it. But if it ends within 6 months, Iran is defanged. I don't know if there'll be a regime change. I have no idea. I haven't heard talk of that yet. Obviously, I know that we wouldn't be hearing that because nobody is for that. In fact, Trump denied involvement because it's so friggin' unpopular. I get it. But if in 6 months this is resolved, it's like Soleimani, it came, it went. Iran is defanged, and the Abraham Accords are expanded. Will you admit that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. Do you think it was, I'm wrong, I was wrong? No. And so my thing with regard to what you're saying, Drew, is I've learned to sit back and wait it out with Trump.
Maybe you should sit it out a little longer. Because to say that the conflict with Iran is over is literally the most brain dead thing I've heard Jillian say. And she's said a lot of brain dead things. Okay, so let's talk about what happened after the US struck Iran's nuclear sites last summer. Nothing ended, okay? So we struck their sites, and the concern from sane people like Dave Smith, like me, is look, if we strike them, there is a very real possibility that they will strike back and we will be dragged into a hot war with Iran. That's what a logical person would be concerned about. Now, Iran surprised us because they showed tremendous restraint following what Trump did. Rather than go to war with us, they did some BS, strikes on US military bases after telling the US to evacuate the troops there so no one gets killed, in order to provide lip service to their people, make it seem as though they did a response to what the US carried out. They don't want war. They don't want war with the United States. The only thing that prevented a drawn out, devastating regime change war in the US where our soldiers would risk their lives on behalf of Israel, of course. That's what the center of this is. The only thing that prevented it was Iran's restraint. I know that's hard to hear, especially when you're constantly providing cover for a country that has absolutely no constraint and has carried out a genocide in Gaza. But Iran is the country that showed restraint. Okay, but was it over after that? No, of course it wasn't. Because while Trump argued we obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities, what did Benjamin Netanyahu say? No, it's not true. It's not true. They still have enriched uranium. No, it's not true. It's not true. They're doing this. They're doing that. We still got to go in. Which brings us to just last week. What happened last week? Well, I remember being on the show, reading about all the military assets the Trump administration was sending over to that region because a US strike on Iran was imminent amid all of the protests that were going on. Now, what happened after that? Well, we didn't do a strike, luckily. Does that give me some calm? Does that make me think we're never going to strike Iran? No, I think that eventually we probably will strike Iran. But I do want to talk about the protests first, right? So the protests were the excuse for why the Trump administration was going to carry out these strikes. But we should actually listen to some experts about why the US would want to do a strike, and more importantly, who is behind the protests. They might have started organically, as you're about to hear John Mearshimer, a political scientist and scholar, say. But what spurred the organic protests? And then what happened after? Let's take a look.
When these people are protesting, right, they're protesting because of the terrible economic conditions. But who played the principal role in creating those terrible economic conditions? It is the United States of America. So that's the first step. Then the second step is we decide at some point that we're going to foment massive protests and we're going to fuel those massive protests. There's a very famous piece that came out in the Jerusalem Post on December 29th that makes it clear that Mossad was deeply involved in what has been happening in Iran. Furthermore, there are comments by President Trump and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that make it clear that the United States has been involved from the get-go in terms of fueling this crisis.
Wow, gee, why? Why? I mean, I thought we were done with Iran after successfully bombing their nuclear sites and obliterating their so-called nuclear program. So why is the US and Mossad fueling unrest in Iran? I don't know. Could it be that they're trying to spark regime change in Iran? Could it be? Now, look, to be fair, and I do want to be fair to Jillian, she deserves it. She trusts experts, and that is important to do. But if you're wondering who she considers experts to be, well, she's about to tell you. Take a look.
Many times, because I didn't know enough about any of this at the time, which is why I often wanted somebody like you, Dave, or Coleman Hughes, or Scott Jennings to provide the other point of view. Because I was like, I'm not an expert in this. I don't know. I can't refute the things you're saying.
Dave Rubin is an expert? Dave Rubin is an expert? Scott Jennings and Coleman Hughes are both hardcore Zionists. Coleman Hughes does work for the Free Press, so hardly experts. Certainly simps for Israel gets whatever they want, whenever they want. That's for sure. Man, it is embarrassing to call Dave Rubin, though, an expert. Same with the other two, but Dave Rubin in particular stands out. But anyway, none of the three people she listed are foreign policy experts, nor are they political scientists. Mearshimer, though, is. And so why don't we hear him draw out the rest of this plan for regime change in Iran?
The third step in the process is to foment a massive disinformation campaign. That's to convince everybody in the West that these protests are generated internally, that the United States and Israel have nothing to do with it. This disinformation campaign sends the message inside of Iran that the regime is finished. The protesters are on a roll. Then the fourth step in the process is the United States military, and probably the Israeli military as well, come in once the protests have reached a certain point, and we attack all sorts of critical infrastructure, all sorts of elites inside of Iran, and we deliver the coup de grace. We finish off the regime.
Now, this plot did not work out so well, and we should talk a little bit about why. So Trump both threatened military action against Iran and again built up US military assets in the region, which made it certainly appear as though a strike was imminent just last week. Okay. He ultimately backed down, though, after it became clear that Israel was not ready to withstand an attack from Iran. And you don't have to take my word for it, Jillian. Why don't we go to the Israeli press? It's Israeli, so you'll probably trust it. Report. When he asked Trump, meaning Netanyahu asked Trump, not to strike Iran, Netanyahu said Israel not fully ready to defend itself. So if you are demented enough to think that this is over, maybe you shouldn't be doing political commentary. Maybe you should go back to squatting. But other than that, we could have easily had this conversation. We could have had a debate, and it would have gotten fiery, that's for sure. But I would do my best to engage in a respectful debate. And I totally concede that I have not been respectful in the context of this video. But just to answer your question about whether Anna's gonna apologize to you, how about you apologize to me? Because you were the lead host of the very show you literally walked out on live on air. And if people don't remember, it's because I was critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. Take a look.
Because Charlie Kirk didn't like Netanyahu, just like any warm-blooded American shouldn't. Netanyahu is a bad guy. And he wanted to make it seem like, no, we were all great. We were good. We had a great relationship. Little did we know behind the scenes, there was a lot of pressure toward
ends up being about how do we bash Israel. This is not for me. I am not interested in this.
Okay,
I love you guys.
I'm
sorry.
Let's be good. Let's be good about precious Israel. Let the country committing a genocide. Yeah. Okay.
Zero. I think you guys are great. I fundamentally disagree with you about like every show doing this. I'm sorry.
Cool. So can we continue the conversation?
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
You wanted to do it anyway.
Finish the last topic.
All right.
All right.
Wow, okay, guys. So, again, to clarify, I don't think Israel did it.
I'm sorry, it is not some angelic country. It's a foreign country, and we have the right to be as critical of a foreign country as we want. We have the right to be as critical of our own country as we want.
You were right about one thing, Jillian. This is not for you. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about Piers Morgan's exchange with John Mearshimer because it was fiery. And we've got a lot more news to get to. Come right back.
What contributions to the progressive cause are you most proud of? I mean, I don't have super high aspirations for a singular role that I can play in the movement or anything. I try to present myself as what I think that I am, which is a progressive man who is driven by a, I think, well-interrogated and well-organized system of values that I try to stay consistent on, and I demonstrate that that's the sort of life that a person can lead and be successful and be happy and all of that. And that should not need to be done, but there are so many people on the right that are trying to push men in the opposite direction that I want to be able to do that. Along the way, if I can get people to care about some topics that they wouldn't necessarily care about, or that for some men they might think that's not a topic that they should be focused on, that's definitely something that I relish doing. And along the way, I mean, we've been able to introduce people to a lot of candidates. That's been a big part of what we've done. You know, not all of them necessarily got in office. Probably most of them did not. And a lot of them you might not even remember their names. But it was great to be able to provide people the platform where they had the chance of, you know, making a difference. Obviously AOC and all that, but there's been a lot of great people along the way.
In the bonus episode for the members, we do some inside baseball. We're gonna look at John's desk. Nice little spaceship here. Nerd. But it is kind of look cool. Who has Legos? Oh no. He's taken apart a keyboard. Who has a mouse pad that's this big? He's got a dog with a nose that you can hang something on. You know what this desk screams to me? Nerd. And that's how we like him. We love Johnny Pie. He's got his own personality like everybody does at TYT. Come meet us all in the bonus episodes. TYT.com/team. David Sorrell, Nina Turner.
Adam Green drop by.
Charlemagne.
Congressman, great to have you. It's great to be with you, Chang.
Your show is a great thing. You're informing people. A lot of the shows that I live on, you know, my CNN, my MSNBC, and even Fox, and any of the other shows, NPR, they are so quick to decide that they know what this building means today.
The one thing that I hate that politicians do, you know, they talk about the people they should be talking to.
Do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated? Or do they not realize that at all?
People are so deeply in their little universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing.
Voters have a right to ask questions of any nominee, whether they're independent, Republican, or Democrat.
The system is duopoly that suppresses competition.
How is it the year 2024 and we're still like, maybe they'll talk about paid medical? Like, how is that like at one level it's like, this is what we're talking about now. You're like, it's 2024. And that's always been the critique, that your critique of us is, well, you guys give good speeches, you put out good tweets, but you're not wielding actual power. Now we're starting to.
My favorite news platform by far. It's not even close.
It's about a country and a principle, and that's what you and I both work to achieve, and I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
If you want to go really hear what's going on honestly, you should tune into the Young Turks.
Thanks for doing such a great job. Please keep it up. Hang tough.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, I like making you happy.
I didn't know about that.
This is a happy Anna Kasparian. You're welcome, YouTube.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on TYT.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
My brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. And special thanks to Oodle, who is a new TYT member. Really appreciate the support. I also wanted to read a quick comment from our member, Gary Donahoe, who says, no matter what show Anna appears on, she's always the most honest, informed, articulate, and attractive person on the panel. I don't know about that, but thank you. What a perfect spokesperson for TYT. She makes me proud to be a member. I love you so much. Thank you for saying that. She was strikingly beautiful and the star of the show on her latest Piers Morgan appearance. Cenk is an enforcer when he's the guest on other shows. He was the spitting image of a Roman gladiator in his younger days. Let's not let Cenk know that he said that, okay? We don't, I'm just kidding. I'll let Cenk know, he'll love that. Now he's more like the burly, benevolent sandwich maker at my delicatessen. We love him, Cenk is my hero. Maybe I don't let him know about this comment. I'm just kidding, we love you. Thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and thank you for being a member. I really appreciate that. All right, well, let's get to a fascinating exchange that happened on Piers Morgan's show about the Middle East, Iran, Venezuela as well, which of course is not in the Middle East. But I just thought it was really interesting to hear Piers Morgan get challenged by John Mearshimer, who's a political scholar. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Iran is no threat to the United States.
No, it's not. Why is it a threat to the United States?
Well, maybe because the Ayatollah has repeatedly threatened the United States publicly. They funneled a huge amount of money into propping up terrorist organizations all around the Middle East, all of whom are wedded to the obliteration of Israel, which is America's main ally in the region, and has a lot of interest, mutual interests. Now, you may not like it, but that's the reality. And so, yes, they represent a threat to one of America's main allies.
Well, as you just heard there, during a debate between Piers Morgan and political scholar John Mearshimer, Morgan claimed that Iran is a threat to the United States, only to immediately correct himself, which I'm happy about, and state that Iran in reality only poses a threat to an ally of the United States, and that of course is Israel. Now, Mearshimer's response pretty much to everything in this exchange was fantastic, but why don't we listen a little more to what he had to say in this part of the conversation?
You're making the argument that they're not a threat to the United States, they're a threat to Israel. And because we're joined at the hip with Israel, anything that's a threat to Israel is a threat to the United States. I don't buy that argument. I'm an American firster. I care about the US national interest. And it is not in our national interest to have this conflictual relationship with Iran. And if it weren't for the fact that the Israelis have so much power in the United States and insist that we keep Iran as an adversary, we would otherwise have good relations with the Iranians.
I mean, he's absolutely right about that. And in fact, his book, which he co-wrote with another political scientist, scholar Stephen Walt, called The Israel Lobby, really delves into the reasons why the US went into various Middle Eastern wars, but Iraq in particular, right, in 2003, the preemptive war. And the Israel Lobby, which is the title of the book, obviously talks about the undue influence foreign lobbies, in this case, the Israel lobby, has over our political system and our politicians, and how we are willing to, or at least our government is willing to engage in foreign entanglements, not because they're beneficial to the United States or the people within the United States, but because it's beneficial to the nation state of Israel. So as we all know, we've seen the videos dating back to the 80s. Netanyahu has been pushing for war with Iran for a very long time. He's been wanting regime change in Iran for a very long time. But Israel doesn't have the capacity or capability to do that unilaterally. So they want to drag the United States into it. Now, Mearshimer's debate with Morgan covered a wide range of foreign policy issues, from Venezuela to Iran to Gaza. And for the purposes of today's show, I just want to kind of hyper focus and stick to their discussion on the Middle East. So Morgan conceded that the US and Israel are likely interfering with Iranian internal affairs in order to create unrest and basically the conditions for regime change. But he still believes that the protests overall are organic. And there were. Look, the economy has been totally destroyed in Iran due to the brutal sanctions that the US has implemented, making it very difficult for them to export one of their big moneymakers, which is oil, of course. And so since their economy is in ruins, the people of Iran are suffering. And so there were organic protests that started off in regard to the economic conditions on the ground. But they didn't remain organic. And I've talked about that in great detail. You can go back and watch those videos. However, in this case, the way that you see this exchange go down, you have one guy who's pretty well read and obviously an expert on this issue. And then you have Piers Morgan, which I can't believe it, seems to be falling for the same type of game plan and rhetoric that Americans in the West overall fell for in the lead up to the preemptive war in Iraq in 2003. Let's go to our next video.
I do happen to think that the overarching motivating factor for this uprising is the people of Iran have had enough of the state of this country under 47 years of very autocratic, religious, controlled life. They've had enough of it.
I don't think that's the major reason that they've had enough. The major reason that they've had enough is because of the state of the Iranian economy. And what has happened here is that over time, with economic sanctions, we have wrecked the Iranian economy. We are principally responsible for driving these protests. People are protesting the state of the Iranian economy, which is in dire straits, in large part because of American sanctions. Had there been no American sanctions, there would be no protests today.
So, my definition of organic protests is a little bit different from Mearshimer's, but I get the point that he's making, and it's a legitimate point. The economic conditions on the ground in Iran were, not just partly, but for the most part, created through these US sanctions. So are people in Iran protesting, or were they protesting because they themselves were legitimately frustrated about the economic conditions? Yes, I think that they were legitimately frustrated by the economic conditions and they took to the streets. I consider that organic because they're not actors, right? They're not astroturfing. These are real people who are feeling the real brunt of these sanctions. But when I think of the inorganic element of these so-called demonstrations, I'm more talking about the involvement of Mossad on the ground, which the United States and Israel have both bragged about at various points over the last few weeks. Now, on top of that, throughout the debate, Mirshimer argued that the United States should not intervene in the affairs of other countries. And honestly, I agree with that. I think that we should use our military for defense, actual defense from any type of threat abroad. But Morgan noted that Mearshimer's standards are a little different when it comes to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So let's take a look at that.
I believe in sovereignty. I don't like the idea of countries coming into the United States and interfering in our politics. And I'm sure you as a Brit don't want other countries interfering in British politics. The same basic message.
Do you feel that way about the way Vladimir Putin's interfere with Ukrainian politics and life?
I think that Vladimir Putin went into Ukraine, as you know, because NATO was threatening to bring Ukraine.
Yeah, but he's interfering directly. He's interfering directly in the politics of his neighboring country. By your argument, you've just expressed to me, you should be against that.
No, I think there are certain circumstances where you do that. I understand that full well. I understand that when we went to war against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan in World War II, we were going to end up doing regime change once we won the war.
Okay, so for Mearshimer, there are obviously some situations, the exceptions to the rule, some situations in which he feels that US military intervention makes sense for, the good of our allies or the good of world peace. And look, I think that Mearshimer's point on Russia's fears, security fears, or whatever. I know there's big debates about that, but that is a point that he's been making. He's really under this impression that Russia would not have invaded if NATO hadn't continuously encroached on its security, right? That's the argument that he makes. I've heard him make it many, many times. I know a lot of people disagree with it. I don't fully buy it, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, we made a promise to Ukraine after they gave up their nukes in the 1990s. The US promised to provide security for Ukraine. The thing is, though, I do think that the US has prolonged what's been going on in Ukraine to the detriment of Ukrainians. And I don't really see a way for them to win this war. And it's just a devastating story. But either way, I need to understand the psychology behind individuals like Piers Morgan, like Jillian Michaels, by the way, right? So they have no problem speaking out against the massive US fumble in doing a preemptive war against Iraq in 2003. But you see the same patterns play out when it comes to Iran, a little different, but the same patterns effectively. And they fall for it all over again. It's amazing. It really is. And there's no pause. There's no brakes on the car. There's no like pattern recognition. Can we work on that in our public education system? Like, can we work on pattern recognition a little more? Because the fact that you have people co-signing to a potential hot war between the United States and Iran is insane. It's genuinely insane. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, I might have a little bit of time to get into one other part of their discussion, which I thought was interesting. Mearshimer accused Piers Morgan of engaging in genocidal rhetoric. But we do have other news to get to, including just how much President Trump has made in personal wealth in his second term in office. We'll be right back. One of my favorite comments from our members is the one I'm about to read from Boomer Cat Dragon. It's like a recurring comment, not just from Boomer Cat, but from many of our viewers, many of our members. And it makes me feel really, really good about the community we're building here. I know I say this too often, but this audience and TYT give me the support I need. These 2 hours are my favorite time of the day. Aww. I love it. Thank you so much for saying that. And thank you for giving me purpose, right? This audience gives me purpose, and I love you guys. Melody Loves Music gifted 1 TYT membership. Thank you so much for the support. Kelly K says, sorry, Anna, and don't worry, Canadians aren't blaming Americans. We know you guys are at the mercy of the Third Reich. Eddie Jameson says, I love that Anna has no kids, and yet she has more empathy for kids being murdered in Gaza than the same people who claim having no kids makes her selfish. Yeah, I actually really, really love kids. And, you know, my brother has 4 kids, and I try to spend as much time with my nieces and nephew as I can. And what I love about spending time with them is that it reminds you, first of all, of who you were when you were a kid. Like, it brings that part of you out again, right? And you're just able to like be a kid and play with them and have fun. But you can't help but just note how defenseless they are, how trusting and innocent they are. And it's just like, oh God, I can't imagine kids going through what they're going through in Gaza. It's just devastating. All right, let's go to our super chats. We have CDN Norse Dog Dad, who says Jillian Michaels is a Zionist and Dave Rubin is for sale to the highest bidder. He's also a Zionist, by the way. The one thing that I'll say about Dave Rubin, I don't think that he was genuine or sincere about anything he said on any of his shows or whatever on when he was with TYT. I think it was all theater. I mean, obviously. But there was one thing that he was genuine about, and that was Israel. Okay, so he's definitely a hardcore Zionist, no question about that. Zionist lobby gives Dave big money and he says what they tell him to say. Look, honestly, I think he would say it anyway, but yeah, Rubin will definitely take money to say other things. I don't doubt that. Matthew Perry says the Greenland deal likely involved some sort of system at Denmark's expense or side deal with the US paying for it. I have no idea. I'm going to wait for some details to come out before I don't want to speculate on it. But it's just, I hope the people of Greenland, whatever the deal is, I hope that they are okay with it. But the people who actually live in these countries, seems like their concerns never matter, and it's pretty infuriating. I mean, I would be infuriated as an American if something similar was happening to America. All right, guys, I want to read one quick comment from Eddie Jameson before we get to the second half of this Piers Morgan, John Mearshimer discussion, because John Mearshimer is the co-author of the Israel Lobby. I read that book when I was in grad school, and it was the one book that left the biggest impression on me. It is a long read and it is a dense book. However, you will learn a lot. And Eddie Jameson writes it and says, I started reading the Israel Lobby recently. I thought I was well versed in Israel's influence in the United States, but I didn't even know the half of it. Yeah. Guys, if there's one book that I would recommend, it would be that book, especially because of how its importance is recurring. Okay, it really is. So check that out if you can. And for now, we'll get to our next story. So let me just pull it up. So Piers Morgan has been a critic of the IDF's conduct in Gaza. Now, he wasn't always a critic. It took him a while to finally realize that the IDF was carrying out war crimes and atrocities in Gaza. But over the weekend, he stunned Professor John Mearshimer, a political scientist and scholar, when he stated that Israel isn't committing a genocide. So here's how that went down.
Piers, I'm shocked at your rhetoric. In the past, when we have talked, you have readily recognized that the Israelis are committing genocide in Gaza.
I've never said that. I've never said that.
Furthermore,
I've never said that. I've never actually said I believe it constitutes a genocide. I think that you've heard genocidal language from people like Smodrich and Ben-Gvir, but I don't think it can be constructed as a genocide, because I don't think people who actually wage a genocide are interested in doing ceasefires, which we've now had for, thank God, quite a few weeks and months.
So I do think that John Mearshimer was mistaken in that I personally have never seen a single example of Piers Morgan identifying what has been going on in Gaza as a genocide, much to my chagrin, right? I wish that he would finally just recognize what the reality is. But nonetheless, he has been critical of Israel and the IDF's actions in the Gaza Strip. And he goes on to explain what he believes Israel has been doing in Gaza. Let's take a look.
So what do you call it? Mass murder?
I would call it a form of ethnic.
What's the phrase that you use to describe what's going on? I have phrased it as in Gaza.
I believe it's been a form of ethnic cleansing, but I've not gone as far as saying it's a genocide.
You don't think it's mass murder?
I think that the Israel argument about calling it mass murder is that they believe they are responding to defend their people from actual genocidal maniacs, Hamas, who are wedded to the destruction of Israel and the death of all Jews, and showed on October the 7th that they intend to do just that. And I think that my argument with the way Israel's respond is that the response was completely disproportionate, went way too far. And like I said, they've broken a number of laws in the way that they've responded. But I have not actually categorized it as a genocide.
So John Mearshimer is not known for doing the befuddled Tucker Carlson expression when he's talking to people, right? So the fact that he has that befuddled look on his face tells you a lot about what he thinks about what Piers Morgan is saying. First of all, everyone has heard what Israel claims about what they've carried out in Gaza, and I don't care to hear it anymore. So Piers Morgan trying to skirt the issue by regurgitating what Israel thinks they're doing is ridiculous and a waste of time. But he then kind of goes on to say, that's what they say. I think they've gone too far. I think they've gone too far.
Genocide. All of the major human rights organizations in the world, including B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights group, has said that it's a genocide. The United Nations set up a special international commission to study this issue. They categorized it as a genocide. All sorts of scholars of the Holocaust, like Omar Bartov, and scholars who study genocide have said it is a genocide. And as I said to you before, if you don't want to call it a genocide, I think you have to at least admit that it's mass murder.
I mean, you guys know where I stand on this issue, and I totally agree with John Mearshimer. I don't know why so many people who otherwise have engaged in intelligent debates and conversations are pretending like they don't see what's happening in Gaza. I think Piers Morgan sees what's happening in Gaza. I think a lot of people in media are terrified of becoming targets of these, pro-Israel mobsters who try to destroy your life and your family members' lives if you're willing to call a spade as it pertains to Israel and the genocide they're carrying out in Gaza. They're worried. They don't want to deal with the heat. And I get that. But it's embarrassing because people are going to remember all of the cover members of the media have provided to Israel as it carries out its atrocities. And I don't really want to hear anything Piers Morgan has to say about Russia. Oh, you want to talk about Russia's war crimes? Interesting. Can we go back to how you don't think Israel's mass slaughter campaign in Gaza is a genocide? You lose all credibility. You have no moral leg to stand on when you provide cover for the atrocities committed by one country while whining about the atrocities committed by another country. I have no problem admitting that Russia invaded a sovereign country and has been committing war crimes. Have they committed a genocide? No, there's absolutely no organization that studies the issue of genocide. There are no genocide scholars making that argument. But obviously, I can be convinced if that is in fact happening. In the case of Gaza, it doesn't even matter if Israeli organizations, human rights organizations say that it's a genocide. You can't get Piers Morgan to call a spade, and that's pretty pathetic. Anyway, let's move on to something entirely different because the New York Times put out really interesting summary, I guess you could put it that way, of how much money Donald Trump and his family have personally made through his second term. So President Donald Trump has profited from his return to the presidency by an amount of money equal to 16,822 times the median household income in the United States. And that's according to the New York Times editorial board, which decided to kind of track Trump's personal wealth and how much that personal wealth has increased during his very short stint so far in his second term. So they write that Trump has used the office of the presidency to make at least 1.4 billion with a B dollars. So we know this number to be an underestimate because some of his profits remain hidden from public view and they continue to grow. Now remember, crypto is a great way of profiting and making money on a personal level without having to disclose much of it. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But they did provide very specific examples. And you guys should read the entire piece because there are examples in here that I don't have time to talk about, but here are the ones that really caught my eye. So they note that the Trumps have made at least $23 million from licensing Trump's name overseas since his reelection. So here's the issue with that, right? Typically, when other countries agree to these licensing fees and all these various business deals, not on behalf of the United States, but specifically on behalf of Trump and his family, they get rewarded for it. A little bit of a quid pro quo, you know? So let's give you some examples. A hotel in Oman, an office tower in Western India, a golf course on the outskirts of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. These are a few of the more than 20 overseas projects the Trump organization is pursuing, often requiring cooperation from foreign governments. And guess what? Those foreign governments do get rewarded. They do get their cookies if they are willing to comply with Trump and help him make some money. So the administration agreed to lower its threatened tariffs on Vietnam about a month after a Trump organization project broke ground on a $1.5 billion golf complex outside of Hanoi. Vietnamese officials ignored their own laws to fast track the project. So are you guys getting a better sense of what the trade policies are for Trump? Or more importantly, what motivate the tariffs that he slaps onto random countries? Could it be that he uses the tariffs as leverage for his own personal business dealings? Could it be? Seems like it. So there's more. Major tech and media companies have paid Trump $90.5 million in settlements since his reelection. And as the editorial board at the Times notes accurately, none of these lawsuits that Trump filed against these media companies really had any merit. However, all of them settled. And they settled because, you're talking about the president of the United States who can make some pretty big decisions that could, hurt your business. We're talking about X, ABC News, Meta, YouTube, and Paramount. And so the Paramount Skydance merger was approved by Trump's FTC soon after they reached a settlement with Trump. So pretty incredible. And of course, this had to do with a 60 Minutes segment, which ridiculously Trump claimed was edited to make Kamala Harris sound better than she actually sounded in the full clip. In context, of course, I think she sounded bad in both, and I don't think it made a difference in the election. Trump won. So the lawsuit really didn't have much merit, but it didn't matter because settling it would ensure the Paramount Skydance merger. There's more. Qatar, for instance, gave Trump a $400 million jet that he will use as Air Force One while president and plans to take with him after leaving office. As long as Israel is allowed to buy our politicians, I would advise Qatar to spend more. That's it. Spend more. Oh, the Zionists in the country are upset about that? Okay, great. Let's get foreign money out of politics. Oh, you don't want to do that? Okay, well then in that case, under this system, I think Qatar should spend more than Israel and free our country from the influence of the Israeli government. I would love that. How about we do that? It's a good middle ground in this corrupt system that we're unfortunately victimized by. Anyway, there's more. The Trumps have made at least $867 million through various cryptocurrencies. Now, this is where I think the underestimates come in because it's really hard to track how much money he is personally making through these cryptocurrencies. But of the profits that can be tracked, Trump's scale of crypto has been by far his biggest moneymaker, according to Reuters. People who hope to influence federal policy, including foreigners, can buy his family's coins, effectively transferring money to the Trumps, and the deals are often secret. Secret deals obviously mean that we don't know just how much money Trump has made personally through the office of the presidency in his second term. Finally, one that has become public, and this is about the cryptocurrencies, of course. A UAE-backed investment firm announced plans last year to deposit $2 billion into a Trump firm 2 weeks before the president gave the country access to advanced semiconductor chips. So, is Trump pursuing policies with foreign countries to benefit the American people? Or is he working with tariffs and using them as leverage, which obviously hurt our economy and hurt the American people, in order to do business deals? Essentially, pressure foreign countries to approve business deals that benefit his family business. I think we know the answer. I would love to see a president who actually values America and Americans, puts us first, and works with foreign countries, not on negotiations that would benefit him personally, but on negotiations that would be mutually beneficial, because that does exist. But it's hard to pursue mutually beneficial deals when all you care about is yourself. So here we are. All right, when we come back, our Treasury Secretary has an interesting view on private equity, real estate, and more importantly, how many homes he thinks Americans are able to buy. We'll be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to our social break. There's a lot of comments. I'm going to do my best to read as much as I can. CDN Norse Dog Dad says, the orange blob thinks he's GOG, Gog, and or God. I think you mean God. He thinks he's God and hopefully ends up like his character in movie Civil War with the soldier and the photojournalist driver standing around what's left of him. I'm so sorry. I don't know which movie you're talking about. I don't know what GOG is, but I hear you and I think I share your sentiment. History Speaks writes in and says, the propaganda we've been subjected to on how Israel is better for Christians than Palestine needs to be challenged more aggressively. Christians have endured discrimination, especially under Hamas, but in Gaza or elsewhere, there is no issue of Palestinian Christians being attacked or having their land stolen or spat at. These are constant issues for Palestinians in the West Bank, where a Christian village, Tebe, is subject to endless settler attacks. Nothing like this happens in Palestine. I mean, you know, I agree with you on this, History Speaks. And in fact, this is something that I have like some personal knowledge of because yes, there are definitely Palestinian Christians, there's no question. But remember, a lot of Armenians fled Armenia during the genocide and went to Israel. Well, it's called modern day Israel, but a lot of them live in Jerusalem right now. There's the Armenian quarter and Armenians are overwhelmingly Christian. So they've been dealing with the harassment as well. And there's a lot of fear that the settlers are just gonna take over the Armenian quarter as well. So I hear what you're saying, and I'll try to make an effort to focus more on how the Christian community is treated there. Jonathan Morton says, Islamic State is burning the Shiite mosques. The Pakistani insurgency has been provoking demonstrations. There is no organic demonstration going on in Iran. So the Islamic State, by the way, some interesting things have been happening in Syria. A lot of ISIS prisoners have escaped, like thousands of them have escaped the prisons in Syria. There's a lot of unrest in Syria. You have videos of Kurdish women having their throats sliced open by security forces in Syria. It's just what we did in Syria by arming Al-Qaeda terrorists was so stupid. So, and now Syria has been divvied up. You have Turkey taking over some of that territory. Obviously, you have Israel annexing some of that land. And you have an Al-Qaeda terrorist controlling Syria now. Al-Qaeda, by the way, carried out 9/11, allegedly. Okay. So frustrating. All right. Charlie Lee says, I really hope Mearshimer writes a sequel to Israel Lobby that captures 2020 onward. Would be a crazy bestseller. I totally agree. Yep. One of our super chatters actually has a fantastic point that I want to raise, or at least draw attention to. This is Claude, who says there isn't a genocide in Ukraine because we, meaning the European Union, and let's keep it real, also the United States, allow Ukraine to defend itself. I don't think we should compare wars as if they are all the same. They have different motives, good or bad. No, I agree with you about the different motives. But I also definitely agree with you in regard to allowing Ukrainians to defend themselves, right? Is that the case with Gaza? Are the Palestinian civilians in Gaza able to defend themselves from what Israel has been doing, not just over the last 2 years, but obviously for a very long time now? So anyway, good point, and I largely agree with you. All right, let's move on to our next story. I want to talk a little bit about this statement from Scott Bessent.
Maybe your parents, for their retirement, have bought 5, 10, 12 homes.
I'm sorry, what? Can we play that again? That was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Let's watch.
Maybe your parents, for their retirement, have bought 5, 10, 12 homes.
I mean, maybe Maria Bartiromo's parents, but certainly not my parents. Certainly not the vast majority of Americans. But nonetheless, as you can tell, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent opted for the trappings of an out-of-touch lunatic during his interview with Maria Bartiromo at the World Economic Forum. This is, of course, in Davos, Switzerland. So this is strange considering that he made the remark during his long explanation for why institutional investors like private equity firms should not be allowed to buy single-family residential real estate, which, by the way, I agree with that. I always have to add the caveat that that is not the end all be all. That is not going to be the thing that fixes our very real housing crisis. Our housing crisis has to do with the fact that we have a shortage of homes, meaning we need to rethink zoning and we need to build more housing. That is the most important thing. But allowing private equity to buy up residential real estate in the middle of a housing crisis is insane. And so the Trump administration is alleging that they want to do something about it. So yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order banning institutional investors from buying residential real estate, which is likely unconstitutional and will be overturned by the courts. That's my prediction. You can't do everything through executive order. It's going to be challenged. It'll go to the courts. It'll be overturned. You need Congress to pass legislation. Although I will say something, there are some tools that the administration has that they're planning to use. And I'm curious to see how that plays out. So stick around for the details on that. Now, here's Bessent on why he believes institutional investors should be banned, at least for now, from purchasing residential real estate.
For those of you who are not American, in the US, pre-Great Financial Crisis, institutional investors did not participate in the single family market. So post the financial crisis, institutional investors hoovered up single family homes. They continue to do it. And there's an unfair tax arbitrage there. You and I have a mortgage. We can deduct the mortgage amount. Institutional investors can deduct the borrowing amount, but they can also expense any repairs and depreciation. So We think that it is a good idea to have them out of the market. We are going to give guidance at some point to see what is a mom and pop that someone, maybe your parents for their retirement have bought 5, 10, 12 homes. So we don't want to push the mom and pops out. We just want to push everyone else out.
Look, I know I'm harping on it, but Scott, you need to talk to normal people. Maybe the circles you run around in, people in their retirement have purchased 10 homes. I would be shocked if there's a sizable portion of ordinary Americans buying up 5, 10, 15 homes in retirement. But okay, that's just the one gripe I have. I largely agree with the idea that these, institutional investors should not be buying residential real estate, at least right now, and probably in the future too. And the reason why I say that is because, again, the biggest issue right now is the fact that we don't have enough homes, okay? So when you don't have enough homes, it doesn't make sense to allow foreign investors or private equity firms to buy up whatever homes we have. Now, I'm gonna skip ahead a little here because in 22 specific US countries, institutional investors own between 5% and 10% of the housing stock. That is a lot of housing, again, in the middle of a shortage of housing. Okay, so let's talk about Trump's executive order a little bit, because what does it actually do? In theory, here's what would happen, at least in the way that the Trump administration is selling it to us. So in 30 days, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will give the administration his official definitions of both large institutional investors and single family homes, right? Like let's make sure that we are defining exactly what we're going after here. Other cabinet members are supposed to weigh in on this. And then Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Federal Trade Commission Chair, Andrew Ferguson, will look into the holdings of large institutional investors. And they're alleging that if needed, they'll use antitrust laws to bust those investors' coordinated vacancy and pricing strategies. I mean, that, first of all, let me just get this out of the way. I don't believe them. I don't think that they're actually going to do this, okay? But if they prove me wrong, I will be the first to come on this show and say, you know what? I predicted incorrectly. It turns out that they were serious about this and they're actually doing it. I doubt that's going to happen, but I would be elated if they prove me wrong. Second thing I'll say is this is an interesting tactic, and I'm curious to see if they do try it, whether or not it works. However, the most important thing here, if you want policy that sticks, is law, is legislation. And Trump has instructed Congress to codify this ban into law, which of course they're not going to do because they're corrupt and useless. Congress is useless. I can't think of a single body within our government that's more useless than Congress. Can you tell I really don't like Congress? Okay. So according to the lever, Trump's executive order does not apply to properties that are built to rent. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Okay, so at least one corporation is ready to take advantage here. So there's Invitation Homes. We've talked about them on the show before. And they own roughly 86,000 residential homes in the US. They spent $89 million to acquire ResiBuilt, which develops homes designed for lease. I don't see a problem with that, right? Like they are spending money to build homes that they plan to rent. Okay. That increases the stock of rental units. So that's good in some way, even though these guys do a terrible job maintaining the properties and actually responding to their tenants' concerns or calls to repair things. And I think that we should bolster laws to ensure that these institutional landlords aren't essentially serving as, what is the word for it? Basically abusing these tenants and neglecting them, right? Like there should be stronger laws to prevent that from happening. But the bigger picture here is they are spending money to build rental units. Okay. My biggest issue with private equity firms is we have a housing shortage And they are buying the limited inventory of residential homes. That's a huge problem. According to Resi Club, in 2021, Invitation Homes began building or buying built-to-rent homes. Last quarter, 81% of their acquisitions came from built-to-rent homes. So that's what we're dealing with when it comes to this issue of private equity firms buying residential real estate. I want to follow this story closely and see if anything comes out of it. I'm worried that we're all just going to forget about it and Trump will get his cookies. He'll get his plaudits for allegedly preventing private equity from buying up residential real estate, but he has to actually do it. Simply signing the executive order doesn't mean anything. So we'll wait and see. For now, I'm going to move on to reading your comments because we don't have enough time to do a story, and that's okay. We did a lot today, lots of news. So let's go to Titan of Olympus 03, who says, it's so insane that we willingly allow people in government and media to actively profess allegiance to a foreign nation over America. Treason isn't real. Well, treason is real, of course. It's just that in very specific circumstances, it isn't punished. So if you have the US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, meeting with a literal traitor to the United States, Jonathan Pollard, he sold our intelligence and our secrets to the Israelis. And he was caught, he was convicted. He fled to Israel. And Mike Huckabee met with him. He didn't talk to the White House before meeting with him, just met with him. I can't believe that till this day, Huckabee has not been punished at all for doing that. Wholesome X says, why do we pay Israel more in military aid than we give to South Korea? I think we know why, right? I think we know why. Read The Israel Lobby. It's a really great book and it'll explain a lot. It'll definitely help answer some of the questions that you're having here. All right, let's go back to our members. We have O Branch who says, or Owen Branch says, at least Pearl had the courage to take her Anna beatdown without leaving the debate until the end, unlike Snowflake Jillian. Yeah, look, I gotta say, I found out after the debate, like a day or two after the debate, that there was, this intermission or this break during the debate I had with Pearl, and something that really made me feel terrible. Even though Pearl said terrible things, and even though right now she's putting out highly edited clips to make it appear as though she won the debate, and I'm getting harassment from like the women-hating fans of hers, right? Whatever, put that all aside. I found out that during that intermission, she was crying and there was some question about whether or not she was gonna come back. She did, to her credit, she did. She came back on stage. I felt like at that point, it wasn't a good look for me to keep verbally punching her in the face. So I was a little more restrained in the second half of the debate, which allowed her to have her moments. And I'm happy that she had her moments. But yeah, Jillian is a coward. Target 8059 says, might as well add Mark Levin to the Board of Peace at this point. Please don't give him any ideas because you know he would. You know he would. Lady AF says, wonder if Pierce is afraid of UK speech laws. Actually, to his credit, he has complained about those speech laws. So he might be concerned about it. And as we know, there have been a lot of people, both in the UK and the United States, punished for their political speech that's, of course, critical of Israel. All right, we've got Enix Sound who says, oh my gosh, lost my dad a couple of weeks ago. So I stepped away from all the bad news for a bit. Did I miss anything? What were in the rest of the Epstein files? Yeah, first of all, things are still bad. So you didn't really miss anything. My heart goes out to you. I'm so sorry that you lost your father. As we get older, we start losing people closest to us, the people that we love. And it's one of the hardest things that I'm personally going through to some extent right now. So just know that I feel your pain and I'm with you. And I hope that you find some solace with our community here at TYT. We love you and you're going to get through this. So thank you for writing in and sharing that with us. All right, guys, we are done with the main show, but stick around because Cenk will be joining us for our members only bonus episode next. He will be zooming in and I'm super excited about it. TYT.com/join. See you there.
There was a point where I did want to throw hands, but I'm bigger than you.
I know you are, but what am I?